friends, my name is Marines, and of course I am back here because I read a book that I hated so much that I needed to come talk about it. I recently read the first book in the Zodiac Academy by Peckham and Susanne Valenti. This is like new adult fantasy that is self-published by these two sisters and is huge on Book Talk. When I first joined Book Talk, I felt like I was hearing about it everywhere, but then I curated my feed a little bit more to the point where I wasn't hearing about it so much until recently. Basically what happened is that one creator posted a video that had like a trending sound that is Tyra Banks saying, "I want to give you a 0, but I can't, so instead I'll give you a 1." And they were showing the Zodiac Academy. On the on-screen caption, she said that the book had no plot, no romance, no character development, no plot twists, and no editing. In the comments of that video, people were chiming in with whether or not they liked the book, and that was kind of it. Another creator saw this video and had like a strong reaction to it, so this second creator made a video talking about how quickly she blocked the original creator because she doesn't think that we should be like bashing on books and that no book deserves 0 stars, basically saying and insinuating that it is wrong to review books negatively because you could be stealing a potential reader or fan from an author, and you could be keeping a reader from what could be potentially their favorite book. So by you reviewing it negatively, you're basically stealing that opportunity from the author and from the reader. In the video also, the creator basically said that this had nothing to do with it being about Zodiac Academy specifically, even though she really loved that series. This was just like a moral, like general thing, like nobody should talk bad about books, period. But in the comments of her own video, there was a lot of like strong defense of Zodiac Academy and a lot of people just saying like, how could anybody bash the authors this way or bash the work this way? The Twisted Sisters, which is what the two authors kind of collectively call themselves, like saying that the Twisted Sisters were wonderful and that they were so great and the book was so awesome. So just a lot of fangirling that made it clear to me personally that a lot of this defense, like this strong reaction, was indeed a lot about this being about the Zodiac Academy and just like the defensiveness of the fandom in general. Like clearly I have a lot of thoughts about everything else this person said about how no book deserves 0 stars and the weird positivity culture that is really present on Book Talk that like consistently gives out this message that like negative reviews are bad and that we have to be respectful in our reviews. Like it's a lot of weaponized positivity and respectability politics when it comes to reviews. If you're not on Book Talk, that is something you're missing, I guess. But anyways, I have a lot of feelings about that. But the petty Betty in me, who had never been interested in reading the Zodiac Academy at all, was like, well, now I want to read it because like these people are going to the mat to defend this book and like talk about how wonderful it is and to like base this whole argument that no book deserves 0 stars like on this work. So I was like, okay, cool, let's read it. Let's let's give it the old try. I will say that I started to read it and I hated it immediately. It was like immediately apparent to me like the kind of poorly written, poorly edited, tropey garbage that this would be. And I got to like the 50% mark and like put it aside. I don't know that I like consciously was like, I'm DNFing this. I just put it down and didn't want to read anymore because at that point it was, I am not exaggerating, causing me literal pain to read, like physical discomfort to read. So I put it aside and I kind of forgot about it and things went really wild in my life for a couple of weeks. I had back-to-back trips for like not fun reasons. And then I finally got home. I was feeling really exhausted and really down. Some part of my brain went, well, you know, Zodiac Academy can't be worse. So I picked it back up and I finished the last portion of the book. In this book, we follow two twins, Tori and Darcy, and they are orphaned at a young age and they grew up in the foster system, in and out of foster homes. When they reach their 18th birthday, they are living out on their own, but they are barely scraping by until a big burly stranger like tracks them down and basically says, when you turned 18, started sending off signals that alerted us to the fact that you are actually Fae and you belong in the Fae realm. And they're like, what? Actually, they don't protest all that much. There's some brief pause, but the teacher basically explains that they've got an inheritance, that their real parents left them in the Fae realm, and they're actually changelings, and they got swapped out for other twins, and their real parents are dead, their foster parents are dead, everybody's dead, they belong in the Fae realm, and they're gonna go now. They have to go because this Professor Orion has the power to compel them to go, and he's basically like, shut up, let's go. And he takes them over to the Fae realm, where they are entered into like the Fae college. And once they get there, the principal of the Fae college reveals that not only are they like from the Fae realm, not only are they changelings, but they are actually the lost twin princesses of this realm. And since their parents were killed and they have been gone, 4 other Fae families have been sharing power and ruling over the Fae realm. And now that they are back, that power within those families is going to be challenged. And so the heirs to those families, 4 boys, 4 young men, who you would not be surprised to hear are super hot, they feel really threatened. And so they take it upon themselves to bully the shit out of these girls. Like really aggressive and violent bullying. And honestly, I was going to keep going with my plot synopsis here, but that's the plot, is that these 4 heirs bully the crap out of these girls, and everybody lets it happen. Like the teachers stand by and watch it happen, and there's like a sense that maybe it's because this Fae world is like really cruel, like there's a cruelty to it, but there's no clear indication that that is true or what the guidelines are. Like they do things to them that are so extreme, like push them out of windows, hold them over cliffs, things that are like physically dangerous, and then just like a lot of emotional bullying as well, like making them strip naked, cutting off their hair, things that are really, really terrible. There's no clear indication to me, like why they wouldn't kill them and who would stop them if they tried. Like what are the lines here? Why didn't they try to kill these girls if it was like a huge deal? And also nobody cares about the violence being done. Like I'm not sure why they wouldn't just be like, well, I'm actually going to push you off this cliff and then all my problems are solved. I don't know. I guess throughout, the 2 twins are also trying to figure out like how to exist in this world, but they aren't actually very curious. There isn't a lot of like investigation of like who they are, who their parents were, what caused them to die. They just kind of like accept that they have to sit here and accept this bullying, and also everybody's going to keep them in the dark about the world. There were so many times that people were like, you don't know this, and they're like, I grew up in the mortal world, I just got here. But then also nobody bothered to explain, and I guess I understand why nobody who hated them would explain anything to them, but they're literally at a school. They're at a school and there's like no education that happens. There's like no plot relevant lesson that happens to be like, here's some things you, the reader, would like to know and that our 2 main characters should know. Even the people who support them like don't answer questions or lead them in any way that feels logical. It really feels like we're being held back information that either 1, the authors didn't bother to answer themselves, or 2, like we can't know. Like all of this hinges on these 2 girls being in the dark, and so they are kept that way, and so is the reader, in like the most unnatural way possible. That was supposed to be a plot synopsis, and it just like devolved into me already griping about this book. So I guess that is plot synopsis, and the first thing I had a problem with, which was just how absolutely nonsensical like the setup and the plot were in general. You can really tell, and this is something that bothers me so much with like fantasy romance and like new adult romance and things like that, that the main thing here that the author wants to explore is the relationship between like the 2 girls and the heirs. I think actually what's being set up is that 1 twin is going to be set up with like the guy who bullied her the hardest, and the other twin is going to be like set up with the professor who feeds on her non-consensually. So, like, the romance is the key part of this. Not that this book, the first book, has any romance, right? This is supposed to be a bully romance. So they go from bullying and it grows to a place where they love each other. This first installment is only bully. It's 100% bully all of the time. There's some moments where you're supposed to feel like maybe there's sexual tension brewing, but is actually just manipulation that feeds into more bullying. That is what made me so incredibly uncomfortable the entire time I was reading. In general, a bully romance is not going to be like super for me, but I can get behind like anything that follows that enemies to lovers like trajectory if it is true, like truly like an arc, right? You see the progression of like where it starts badly and how things change to get to the lovers portion of this. This was all bullying. I'm assuming that you have to continue to buy like all of the books. I think there's like 7, 8, 9 in the series so far before you get any sort of payoff. So you just gotta put up with the bullying at first. But even in this one book where there were these moments of sexual tension or whatnot, the twins were reacting in ways and doing things that just absolutely made no freaking sense. And then the fact that I kept thinking about how the ways that they were reacting made no sense made me feel terrible and guilty because it felt like victim blaming in a way I also wasn't comfortable with. Like, it was not their fault they were being bullied at all, but then also like in one scene, a twin was like, "Oh man, 2 of my bullies are going to be in that class. I'm like really worried. This is very stressful." She goes to the class. She's with her sister and her group of friends, but she decides that they're kind of annoying, so she's going to take off and walk alone in abandoned caverns, and that's where her bullies find her. And I'm just like, how does this make sense? It doesn't. In another scene, one of her bullies is like a werewolf, because we'll get to the spaghetti against the wall, like world building here. And then he like turns into a werewolf and she like hops on his back and rides him. When like a scene ago, he was holding her over a cliff. How does that make sense? How I never felt like I could understand their thoughts, like their decisions, their actions, the progression of any of that. They weren't asking any questions. Their very existence here, like I understood that they needed the money, but at no point did they think, can we get the money another way? Isn't it our money anyways? Can we steal it? Like, even if the answer was no to all of those questions, a little bit more of like, this sucks in this situation and we would like to try to get out, versus like the sort of passiveness that they occupy in the story to just kind of go along with the flow and constantly be noticing how hot their abusers are. And so you put up with this and the basically no plot of them just going from situation to situation in which they are abused and their consent is violated. And then the ending is just like very nothing. There isn't like a satisfying story here with a beginning, middle, and end. The ending just very much goes, well, now go buy book 2 and read hundreds more pages. Like I've said, the entire bulk of this is just like bullying, but there were so many things about like the way that their autonomy was just violated and their consent was ignored, and just came from every angle and in like so many different ways. And there weren't a ton of ways that it was like sexual non-con, but there were a lot of ways that it felt like stand-ins or symbolism for that sort of non-con, in ways that again were really uncomfortable to read about, and were made more so because of course, these were like freshly 18-year-olds, right? So you have these young women, just like freshly not children, being preyed upon by all of these people, all of them older, some much older than them, but all of them in positions of power over them. Even though they are princesses, they actually wield none of that power. They don't know what it means. They have no knowledge of this world. So everybody who is abusing them is in like an additional position of power above them. And it was just... Have I mentioned that I was in physical pain while reading this? Because on top of that, like, you have all of this bullying, this non-con, no plot. There's nothing else here to grab you, right? There's like no, like, okay, this is a really dark story about dark things that happen, but it isn't that. It is, there's like no other hook here. It isn't like strong characterizations. It isn't like well written. There's nothing else here to make this like to balance out the darkness with like anything else that would be gripping or entertaining. There aren't any highs to balance out the characters' lows. It's just like a steady stream of bad things happen. There aren't wins to really balance the losses. It was just all losses. The world building was hilarious to me. This is often described on TikTok, and I don't know if this was part of like the Twisted Sisters marketing, but as like sexy Harry Potter. So first of all, there was nothing sexy about this first book, so I don't know how many books you gotta wait till the sexy comes, but wasn't here. Second of all, like no part of the magic school of this all really matters, honestly. It felt like the plot device that it is to have them all just sitting there in this school that is supposed to be like Fae Magic College, but also they get detention. Okay, at one point, these four guys are like literally trying to kill one of the twins, and Professor Orion walks in and he's like, face the wall, like nose in the corner, basically, and all of you have detention. And I was like, where are we? How old are we? Why is this happening? It very much had the flavor of, I made these characters 18 because I, a grown adult, wanted to write them boinking, but I actually paid no attention to them not being in high school because why would I? So in addition to this being like a fake world, magic is kind of based like on the Zodiac, I guess. Really, the Zodiac portion of this doesn't play in heavily. They get like a daily horoscope at Magic College High School, and that's the most consistent way that like the Zodiac portion of this really plays in addition to being Fae, and then all of the like Zodiac, they obviously all have like an astrological sign that plays into who they are as well. There's also elemental magic, and usually every person has one element that they can control, and the super special people have two, and then our super special princess twins have all four. And then they are also like shapeshifters. So each Fae has their astrological sign, their elemental power, and then also their like type of creature. So there are Fae that are vampires, there are Fae that are werewolves, there are Fae that can like shapeshift into dragons and other creatures. So really just like everything you could think of for a fantasy story like thrown in here, but very superficially, just like in name only. Like we don't really delve into what it means to be any of this or like look at the magic or anything. It's just like labels slapped on to each of the characters in the most superficial ways. And then on top of all that, the characters are also really shallow. They all feel incredibly tropey to me, starting with our twins, who are the most not like other girls that you have ever seen. They're princesses, they're lost, they've got all four elements, and in comparison to the other female characters who are all like the mean girls or like whiny and annoying, maybe with one exception of one character we really don't see that much. Like then you have our not like other girls like main characters at the heart of it. The four heirs are indistinguishable. Here's what I can tell you about them. You have the meanest one, the vampire one who keeps feeding on them without their consent. The black one who, when he shows up in the scene, one of the twins thinks, I want to touch his hair. The fourth one might be the touchy-feely wolf one, but, you know, don't quote me on that. Otherwise, like, the way they speak and act and everything is pretty, like, copy-paste from one to the other. You really don't get a sense for them. Maybe that's a pro, because maybe I honestly didn't want any more sense of them than I got. On top of that, we do have another character who is Latino. The Fae world, as it is explained to us, is a mirror of our world, and so basically, the character says he's Latino. Don't ask me questions. I'm only not here to review. But anyways, he shows up in the scene and immediately just starts using random Spanish words in his sentences. This is one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to like stereotypes and microaggressions used specifically for Latina characters, where you just give them random Spanish words to start speaking. Oh my God, it drives me up the wall because it immediately shows me that you have no idea how Spanglish works or how code switching works. Like, you've just taken the easiest, cheapest route to being like, this is not a white person that you could think of. Oh my God. He says things like, oh, the school is muy cliquey. And also the rumors going around are locos. And of course he like randomly calls them chicas. And oh my God, I hated it so bad. I hated it so much. I got the sense that some of the other characters were supposed to be like shadowy and shady, specifically Professor Orion. Like, he's obviously keeping secrets like everybody else is from the twins. But really the way that it reads is as if he like his personality just keeps changing and contradicting like everything that we had read previously. Like, he did not act in a consistent way towards the twins. Like, sometimes he was the aggressor and he was also treating them badly, and sometimes he would like jump in and save them and give all the kids time out or whatever, in a way that it was like, who are you and what are you doing and why? So the plot wasn't good, the world building wasn't good, the characterization wasn't good, and that leaves us with the writing. And this book had the audacity, on top of everything that I've already mentioned, to be poorly written. The twins grow up in Chicago, but the authors of this book are from England. They're British, I believe. And so a lot of the spellings were like the British spellings, and they would use like Britishisms in here as well. It is a detail thing, but also, why set this in Chicago if you're not even going to try to be like, these are Americans? This is stuff that they would say. Just set it in London. Just say they grew up in London. They grew up in London. Like, then you can keep, you don't have to try, you don't have to get rid of any of that stuff. But, you know, they don't do that. Their descriptions are actively terrible. They use phrases and like descriptions that are very contradictory or don't make any sense. This is also very badly edited. And of all of the bad books that I've read before, and there were plenty that had punctuation problem, but I think this is the first book where I was just like looking at the page and like screaming internally, oh my God, use a comma. But they never did. And so you just had these like lines and lines of text just like coming at you with terrible descriptions. And that was not fun. I honestly do not understand what there is to like about this book at all. I had a terrible time. When you talk about this book on TikTok, the couple of times that I've seen it talked about, and I got some of these comments myself, people will say, yeah, the first book is terrible, but you have to continue on in the series. It gets so much better. It gets so much better. I've seen people say that it gets better 4 books into the series. Like, you just have to put up with like 4 terrible books, and then, oh my God, it gets so much better. People also talk about it in a way that feels a little like Stockholm Syndrome to me. Like, you know, I really hated it at first, but before I knew it, I had read 7 books and now I love it. And I'm like, are you okay? Do you need to be freed from the experience of these books? And so at first, after I finished, I was like, there's no freaking way I'm going to read another book of this, because like there isn't one thing here that I would say is a positive or a hook at all to like make me want to continue reading. But I've gotten this comment so much now where people are like, no, the first book is absolutely garbage trash, but miraculously the authors learn how to write a book in like the books to come. So now like the petty Betty in me is like awakening once again to be like, well, is it better? So this isn't a commitment to like reading book 2, but I did download it from Kindle Unlimited. So maybe I'll like skim it. I'll try. I'll see how far I get, because I am honestly curious. Nobody wants it to be a better reading experience more than me. Trust me, I do not want to have a repeat experience of book 1, but alas, I will for the views. That's it for me today. If you have read or would like to read the Zodiac Academy, let's chat down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Oh my God. You know. Um, I honestly don't even understand. I might, oh my God.